Hi and welcome to part 2 of my little lockdown project to convert an old Prusa Mendel iteration 2 3D printer into something a bit more modern. If you watched part 1 of the video, you'll know that I'd started building up this P3STEEL frame. You'll also know that I'd hit a couple of snags which I managed to fix. One was around the Z-axis where the rods were too short, and that was resolved, and the other one was around this Y-axis and the Y carriage where the belt was hitting the bracket underneath the carriage. So I had to make a little pulley bracket for the front, this thing here, to bring the height down by about 3mm to stop that happening. So I had a geometry problem. This Y carriage here won't go all the way back without hitting the motor bracket, so it needs a little bit of re-engineering work there. I should have worked it out. If the front was wrong, the back would probably be wrong as well. So that's a little task for this morning, is to come up with a new bracket. I need to get the motor further back and further to the left, and I need a bracket that doesn't get in the way of what's underneath the Y carriage. So it just needs a new bracket putting together, printing out and then installing, and then the belt readjusting. So that's a little job for this morning. The main work that I'm going to be doing today is trying to get some power onto the machine. So this is the power supply. On Thursday night I wired it up with put together a wiring harness and all the wiring I need to get the power from this side where it's going to go to the other side where the electronic box is going to live. So what I'm hoping today is to fix the bracket problem on the Y carriage, is to get this power supply into state where it's tested, working, fits, and will go onto the side, and the wiring's been taken through to the other side and I've got power on. For tomorrow, if I've got successful today, I'd like to get this Y carriage to move by commands, by sending it some G code. So that's what I want to do for this weekend. That's my end game, is get that Y carriage to move back and forth under the command of a computer. If I can do that, I'll be happy and it'll be a successful weekend. But for now, I've got to sort that bracket out. Okay, here I'm using FreeCAD to sketch up the new bracket that I need for the Y-axis. It's actually looking all right. I think this will work. I think it's thick enough in the right places to not break or get deformed. So what I'm going to do now is print this out, and while it's going on the 3D printer, that'll give me a couple of hours to go do some stuff with the power supply. So I'll go back to the power supply while this is printing out. Okay, as you can see, I've put the power supply on now, and I've also got the electronics box on. I've put the bracket on that was causing the problem. I've engineered a new bracket. That's perfect now. That works really well, just as I want it to. It hasn't been plain sailing though. I had some problems with the power supply. I had to do some safety checks before I even plugged it into the mains. That's a given. I checked the insulation on it at 1000 volts. That was perfect. I then checked the earthing of the power supply, and that was not so good. If there'd been a fault, there'd be no guarantee it would blow the fuse. I simply could not plug that into the mains. It was too risky. So I had to take the power supply apart. Please don't do that unless you know what you're doing. I used to design these things for a living, so I know just how nasty they can be, and I have a respect for them. I found a problem on the printed circuit board. Because this power supply hadn't been used for some years, it just sat in stock. There must have been a little bit of corrosion there, so I cleaned that up, reassembled the power supply, replaced a missing screw that was inside it, and powered it up. It didn't work again. I found out that the power panic didn't come with a fuse of any sort, so it was pretty easy to find that problem, put a fuse in, and off we go. So the power supply is now coming up. It's been tested with a load, and it's got the right voltage on it and everything else. So as you can see, it's all installed. The wiring's pretty tidy on it. This lot here is just over long, so the next thing I've got to do is trim that to size and get a little bit of power onto this this board here, the CPU board. But first I'm going to stop and take a break for lunch, so I'll be back a little bit later on to do some more on it. Well, hello again. Yesterday we left it that I was going to go for my lunch, come back and do some wiring. and I did have a very nice lunch. I came back, I did some wiring, and I realised that the box was not quite big enough to get the wiring and the circuit board into. I did jiggle it around. I spent half an hour trying all different ways of doing it, and it just became apparent that even if I did get the wiring in, I wouldn't get the extra board on for the LCD, the display connector. That just wasn't going to happen. So rather than waste my whole weekend trying to achieve the impossible, I decided to hit Control-Alt-Del on the whole thing and go back and redesign the box so that it was a little bit bigger. So I went onto the CAD system, this time on Fusion 360. I went through the design. I moved the Arduino board up by 15mm because I felt that 15mm would give me enough extra room. That was just a guess, I'm afraid, but so I hope that's going to turn out okay. I've also had to redesign the lid because the old lid won't fit the new box. So here are the two boxes together. This is the old one with the Arduino board in and the ramps board. This is the new one. As I say, I've made it 15mm higher. I've also made a little bit of a peak up here as well, because where the power cables turn round, I don't think there was quite enough room there either. So just belt and braces, I've decided to give a bit of extra space there. I couldn't move the whole bit up like this because there's a USB connector in the top, and that's where the firmware and maybe your prints will come from as well. So that's my job for this morning, is to get the ramps board and the Arduino out of that, put them into this, loads of tie wraps, get that onto the frame and start piling the wiring in, and then just have a cup of tea while I think about how it looks. If you're wondering about yesterday, while I was re-engineering brackets front and back for this, there is a reason. This P3STEEL frame comes with it's all 3mm thick laser cut steel, and it comes with a 3mm thick Y carriage, which is this bit here. However, it's got 4 holes in each, one in each corner, to suit this, which is called the Mark III bed, and that's just a printed circuit board bed, aluminium on the back to kind of keep it rigid, and that's okay. I've used these before. But if you've used the Mark 52 bed, this newer one with the magnets in that takes the rip-off, peel-off steel sheets, you're not ever going to go back to anything else. I wanted this, not this. Unfortunately, this has got 1, 2, 3 by 3. It's got 9 holes in it, and you need to use all 9 to keep the printed circuit board rigid, because there's no aluminium or anything to kind of stiffen it up. So what I did was I used this carriage, which is the Prusa carriage, which is aluminium, but unlike the steel at 3mm thick, it's 6mm thick, and that extra 3mm is going downwards. That's why I had to move all the kind of geometry downwards inside the machine to get it to work. So that's the story behind that one. Anyway, I'll finish my coffee, I'll crack on, I'll get this stuff moved into the new box, and then take a step back and see how it looks from there. Well, I've had a bit more success now. I've taken the 2 small electronics box off and put the bigger one on that I printed overnight. I've wired it all up. It does look quite tidy. I've got power onto it. It's got the 24 volts. It's got the 5 volts from the little regulator board that I've added in. I did connect it up in the wrong place and it wasn't working, but I've moved it to the power feed to a different place and it's all okay now. The machine does power up. The firmware does work. So what I've done is I've got on the laptop, I've gone into the Marlin firmware, which is written in C++, and tweaked some of the settings on it, and I've obviously got plenty more to set up. Don't be worried, it's not that complicated, because most of the tweaks they put in just one file, so you just have to go through the configuration file and change the things you want to suit. So I've put it in, I've powered it up. It comes up with a machine name, and I've been fiddling around trying to move the y-axis, which was what I wanted to actually do. So I've achieved what I wanted for this weekend, which was to get that Y carriage to move around. I'm quite happy that I've done that. So the next bit is, if I get a chance to work on it next weekend, is to get more of the axes sorted out and start wiring up things like the heated bed, getting that onto the machine, testing that out, and that will give the power supply some work to do, so it'll be a further test for the power supply. So that's it for this week. I've got some movement out of it, and I've got the LCD working. The funny thing is, the cables for the LCD are a little bit on the let's just say they're not generous. I need the LCD here and it's currently over there. So one of the things I'm going to have to do next weekend, I think the first job, is make up some custom cables so that I can route it a little bit round here and get it bolted onto the front. But that's it. I'm going to turn it off for now. That's my weekend done. It's beer o'clock.